Hi, you're watching The Talking Tavern. I'm Ben, and today I'm joined by Devin Night. He is an artist who has produced nearly 5,000 high-quality tokens that are available on the ever-growing Roll20 virtual tabletop platform. At the time of this interview, he's just released the first pack on Roll20, what is a complete back-to-back commission of the popular Tome of Beasts 5e book from Kobold Press. And with a new Patreon in the works, it doesn't sound like he's slowing down anytime soon. Devin, it's an honour to have you in the tavern. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Right. So let's jump straight in. Roll20 has been around a few years, but obviously you've been creating art longer than that. What is your art background in general?
I've been drawing since the age of 4. And then I went to Columbus College of Art and Design in Ohio. Got a master's and Bachelor of Fine Arts, not a master's. But I draw all the time. Every day, every other day, I gotta draw something. So now it's tokens.
You've been doing that full time for the last few years, I believe, as well.
That is correct. I've been making tokens for about 13 years, but the first 10 were just mildly successful. But in the past 3 years, it's become a much bigger endeavor. And so it's almost full-time for tokens.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, the majority of your tokens are fantasy RPG related. What's your own personal RPG background, if you even have one, actually?
Oh, yeah. I started Dungeons and Dragons back in '84 when I started high school. One of my friends introduced me to it. He's like, you got to check out what my brother's doing. They're like doing this weird fantasy game. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And it just, from there, started playing with my brother and my friends. I'm usually the dungeon master, but I love to be the player too. Mm-hmm. I love creating. I think it just goes hand in hand to like create stuff and be a dungeon master. So
yeah,
I've been doing that forever. Took a little bit of time off when I went to college, even though I tried having some college friends play, and some of them were just too crazy. But then some other guys hooked up. But then, since I moved out of town to go to college and stuff, I couldn't play with my brother. And, he's the one I've been playing with since like 1984. So when I found virtual tabletops, I'm like, this is awesome. It's like now I can finally play Dungeons and Dragons again. And I can include my brother who's in Iowa. He's, 9 hours away. And I'm like, this is the best.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing with the virtual tabletop. It's brought together people who've kind of grown up and have, their own busy lives. They're not kids anymore, and all of a sudden they can kind of rekindle that hobby from many years ago. What version of the game do you currently play?
Currently, I already switched to 5th edition. I'm still learning it. When I play, I'm never really playing an edition. Mm-hmm. I'm always just playing, let's make stuff up and have a good time.
Yeah.
So I've added the advantage-disadvantage thing, but I've totally forgotten about the whole inspiration. Like, it's just not... So I started with the red box. We got that for Christmas and stuff, and we ordered it from the Sears catalog. We waited 2 months for it to be delivered, back then. Mm-hmm. And we started with that. And I've played, I think, every edition since then. But 5th edition seems pretty solid. It doesn't get in the way of me wanting to play Dungeons and Dragons. So that's what we're doing right now.
And it sounds like you, as you've kind of touched upon, the rules are there just in the background, really. And for you, it's more the actual role playing and the telling a story.
Yes. Yep. I never let the rules get in the way of just enjoying a scene. Making something up. Just going with some weird, crazy stuff.
Okay, so we're just going to take a minute now just to look at some of your work on that's on your website on the Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds. So yeah, let's have a look at these amazing tokens you've created.
Thanks.
Okay, so yeah, we saw some of your tokens then. What's your basic process for creating the tokens? What tools do you do? What's involved from start to finish?
It used to be a lot more complicated. When I first started making tokens, I would do a sketch, and then I would take that sketch and use tracing paper and re-ink the entire sketch. And I would usually do parts, like the hands would be separate, the head would be separate, the legs and bodies were sometimes separate. And then I would scan those in to the computer, take them into Illustrator, and streamline them, which takes black and white art and makes it very finite. It's either black and white and streams light, makes it clean. Then I would take it into Photoshop, and then I would color it, and then it'd be done. Now I typically draw almost. I usually I do a rough sketch, and that's just for my head to get the idea of the pose. Now it's almost entirely Photoshop. I sketch in Photoshop, I redraw in Photoshop, then I ink, and then I color all in Photoshop. So the process has gotten so much better, but it's still based on layers. If you've seen one of my YouTube videos, I always work from the bottom up. So legs done, and then torso's done, and arms are done, and weapons and armor stuff.
Right. Okay.
Like that. It's all. The idea was that I could do this and I could mix and match them and do like tons of different tokens really quick. But I find that I almost always draw everything all the time anyway.
Right.
So
yeah,
occasionally it gets easy for me. I can switch stuff up, but it's weird the minute difference between a hand being this way and a hand being this way as far as what it conveys about the character. And I take it a little bit too seriously, honestly.
Okay. So it must be in quite incredible resolution because when I looked at it, when I looked at perhaps some of your more recent tokens, like the detail on them, it's so finite, that detail. I assumed that you must be using something vector based like Illustrator to kind of have that smoothness. It certainly doesn't have, the rough effect I have when I'm knocking something up in Photoshop.
Sadly, I realized yesterday that my hand is not as steady as it used to be. I wish I had line stabilization in Photoshop, but it doesn't exist yet on the Mac. Anyway, I work about 5 times bigger than the final token size.
Right.
I'm working at like a 7-inch by 7-inch canvas at 300 DPI, which is way more than it needs to be. But I add a lot of detail and stuff. The trick is adding the right amount of detail, because when they get reduced, a lot of stuff just gets messed up. I mean, it's so tiny. So the trick is adding big enough details that even when it's reduced, you can still pull out the parts you need to.
Yeah.
That's what I try to do.
Okay. And the point at which it changed from more the hand drawing scanning in, how long ago was that? It looks like there was a noticeable change, I think, from I'm not sure, like the first 20 packs look almost like they've got the hand-drawn quality to them, which it kind of gives it a different style than the other ones. But I'd say that sort of the last, what is it, 80 packs or something like that, they've been of a really high quality. And do you think you're kind of learning little things every time and improving it all the time as well?
Yeah, I think as an artist and personally, if I'm not constantly trying to do better than I did last week, then I wouldn't be happy doing it. So to me, the change even is greater. Like the first 20 packs, obviously, I was getting my feet wet. I was figuring out what I was doing. But even packs, to me, packs 20 through 50 look bad, and packs 60 through 80 aren't as good as what I'm doing today. So there is a definite big step between the old stuff and the new stuff, but to me, like, the process is gradually always trying to improve what I'm doing. I just gotta always try to do stuff better.
So you're quite critical of your own work, I guess, which is probably quite common among artists.
Yeah, exactly. I think all artists who strive to always get better, I think it's just in our nature to always just want to do a little bit better than I did the other day, kind of mentality.
What's your view on, obviously there's different styles of tokens out there, there's like the portrait style, and I know wizards have done their tokens this way. It seems like they've taken the artwork directly from their own monster manual and put that as tokens. But obviously, yours are top-down tokens. Why is it you prefer that style over the portrait style?
That is a good question. There's a lot of great work out there, and there's lots of awesome portrait tokens and stuff. And even in top-down tokens, there's a lot of variety from different artists now. You know, some people doing the pixel stuff, and some people doing very sketchy and stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I ever actually intended to sit down and make overhead tokens and make them popular. It's just, you're looking at the map from a certain perspective usually, especially, and again, this is where role-playing face-to-face changed when it became a virtual tabletop. You know, playing face-to-face, you're always looking at things in isometric view or from the side, and as soon as you hit the virtual tabletop, you only get one angle, and that angle is top-down. So when I first discovered virtual tabletops, I'm like, ooh, I can make little tokens. I'm like, it just seemed natural to do it from the same perspective. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I hadn't seen hardly anything that was done like that. So to me, it was kind of like a challenge of creating these things from that perspective and adding them to the tabletop.
And the angle you use, it's perhaps not quite 100% top-down, straight over the top, is it?
Right.
Because is that to allow a little bit more detail coming in with the faces and so on?
Right. I started using Poser a couple of years ago. And in Poser, if you ever looked at the way these things look in Poser, they're just horribly twisted, mangled messes. But when you hit it from the top down, you have to manipulate it in a way that you can still get the details in. And a lot of people, when they order the custom characters, they want to be able to see the eye color and the facial hair. And if you go straight down, you lose a lot of that. A lot of people look the same when all you see is this.
Yeah.
So my idea was just to tilt the head back a little bit so you could get a face. And occasionally, like if they're like, well, I want the breastplate to have the, like Sturm's logo on it, and then I'm like, well, then I have to rotate the whole body back a little bit so that you can pull in that detail too.
That makes a good point, actually. There's a lot of things on the web which are just kind of top down, almost as if they're rendered from 3D models, so they're using realistic light models and so on. They don't quite stand out in the same way. But looking at your tokens, it looks like you've kind of used the lighting, the shadows and the colours to kind of make them pop out a little bit but still look realistic. Can you
Right.
tell us a little bit about that process of the shadows and so on?
Yeah. That's something that I've strived to work more and more on. Even just my more recent stuff on Tome of Beasts, some of them have lighting that's, again, I feel like I'm growing every time I do it. But some of the rendered ones are great, but you have to control the light so much that when things overlap, you can pull out the arm, and you can add lighting effects that give it more of an effect. You can read it better, and more or less. So when you zoom in, it looks great, but when you zoom out, you still have to be able to read it. And the most important thing there is the silhouette. You need the pose to be in a way that is readable even when it's super tiny. And that's kind of a struggle, but I have about 10 to 20 poses that usually perform really well, and I try to stick with those. But again, there's minute changes to all those poses that kind of make it read just a little bit differently, more aggressive or a little bit more, held back. Yeah. It's tricky, but you just work at it, and I've worked at it for a long time to make it work the way it does.